Hi, this is Ian at Queerty, and I'm joined by actor, comedian, and certified fancy walker, Joseph Kibler. Joseph, welcome and thank you so much for taking time to chat with us.
Oh, thank you for having me. I'm so happy to do this.
You've mentioned your twin brother, John, who, of course, was also born HIV positive and sadly passed away from complications with pneumonia when you were babies. I'm a fraternal twin myself and was conceived through IVF. So that part of your identity really struck a chord with me. I know you were obviously a baby when John passed away, but how is your memory of John and through other stories of from family members or other things that you've heard and such
So
impacted your life?
I'm a firm believer in a lot of logical, factual things. I'm not as spiritual. I'm not as but everything around my brother feels always very like it has to be. Like it's just that whether it's that twin energy or not.
Yeah.
My mom would always tell me the story that I was the most content baby ever. I didn't cry, didn't whine, could be held by anyone. And John wasn't. John had to be held by my mom. And suddenly, after he passed away, I started crying and I could only be held by my mom.
Oh wow.
And she always feels like he somehow knew that they needed that time together, that he was only going to be here for 16 months. And it was just so important for them to be connected at the hip that entire time. I do know that he was probably the more rebellious of the two of us. He used to try to rip my hair out. In fact, the only way you can tell which one of us is which is because I always had less hair because he would literally pull it out of my head.
Gotcha.
Um, but when I was 16, I decided I wanted to get a tattoo for him to honor him. It was one of my first tattoos that I wanted to get. And it's his photo, which is also a little weird because technically then it's kind of like my photo. So it's
Yeah.
like my baby face on my arm, but we'll let it slide. And it has his birth date and it has the day he passed, which was 6/21, 1990.
Oh, wow.
And what was actually really wonderful about that is years and years later, when I met my wife, she said to me, "You're never going to be able to forget my birthday." I said, "Well, why?" And she's like, "Because it's tattooed on your arm." And it turned out that the exact day, month, and year that my brother passed away was the same day, month, year that my wife was born.
Wow. Okay. That's wild.
And just yeah. And so it's what a way to like be able to honor him, celebrate her, and take that date that used to be so hard for me and
Yeah.
make a day of celebration all around.
Yeah. Wow. That is like such a coincidence. I know you said the spiritualness and everything. Yeah, but like what a wild coincidence that all uh,
Yeah.
came out that way. Something really fascinating about your early life and related to obviously you being born with HIV was that you were part of the first infant HIV studies under Dr. Fauci and participated in every HIV drug trial since 1990, I believe
Pretty
you've
much,
shared.
pretty much everyone, injections, pills, everything.
Can you share anything more about that or like any of the impact on the world, I guess, that you've had as a result?
My mom didn't know that we were HIV positive. She didn't know that she was HIV positive. My father didn't know he was HIV positive. He unknowingly contracted it after being unfaithful, and then he gave it to my mom, who then gave birth to me and my twin brother. And when we started to develop, we were getting really sick. We weren't properly developing physically, and they were like, "We have to figure out what's going on." They tested for everything except for HIV because it was 1989 and they just weren't testing for that in a especially in a from a woman and two children who were middle class, non-IV drug users, heterosexual, Caucasian. We just didn't fit the stereotypes that they and the stigmas that they tested for.
Sure.
And they figured out that we were HIV positive, and then my mom was HIV positive. They immediately brought us to the National Institute of Health. The reason that we were so of interest to them and to Dr. Fauci was that they could finally test on twins the same medication and see what the effects would be like.
Oh wow.
And we were able to be a part of that trial to figure out essentially what dosage was good enough to give infants and what was the healthy dosage that they should get. And unfortunately, my twin brother had pneumonia at the same time. And that was just too hard and he couldn't, and he passed. As I started discovering more of what it meant to be HIV positive, then the impact definitely went from external to internal. And I had to live with that secret for a long time. We were probably one of the first trials on the journey to figuring out the U equals U. I mean, we were just right on that cusp where there were people right after us who were able to conceive and have children that never tested positive. Beyond that, I have now stayed on my current regimen for quite some time. And, every time I talk about medications and I'm talking about how many pills I take, people want to be like, well, there's a one a day and there's injectables, and there are. And that's amazing. The thing about for me was that because I have 35 years of HIV, I've developed resistance. So your immunity, it kind of fights off certain things. And so this regimen specifically, we just realized was the best one for me, and I've stayed on it. And why mess with a good thing if it's
Yeah.
undetectable and my T cells are great? What do we, a few extra pills a day is really not that big of a deal.
You've shared a couple of stories like that around certain people not fully grasping the fact that you've literally been a part of this your entire life. And so when they try to mansplain or whatever to you, you're like, yes, thank you. I know very well what you're talking about. I was literally a part of this forever.
It's hard to balance that. You want to be, it comes from a good place.
In the LGBTQ plus community, coming out is a continuous process involving choices about when and how much to reveal about yourself and different situations that you might find yourself in. You're obviously very open about the multiple layers of your identity, including your disability, your HIV status, and your pansexuality online. But how do you navigate those conversations off of social media?
Most of my life, it's felt like I've had to do things in such stages. And it's been about trying to find my comfort levels as I've gone through this. So in a weird way, I've come out several times. And for me, I had to get comfortable with my disability before I could get comfortable with my HIV. Then I had to get comfortable with my HIV before I could get comfortable with my pansexuality. And it was a real struggle. I mean, it's weird to say I came out as disabled because, you look at me and but I came out as being proud of being disabled and about honoring that. And that took a long time of internalized ableism. But this isn't just who I am. I am also HIV positive. And then as I started being open about HIV, it became its own identity in the sense that it got so closely tied to my heterosexuality and being this game changer to educate people. It was suddenly like, wait, HIV isn't just the gay disease. Yeah. It can affect heterosexual people. Okay, hold on. Let me actually listen. If I want to come out as pansexual, does that suddenly erase all the work I've done? Do people stop listening? Will they just go, got it, you're gay and you're HIV positive. You don't need to tell me anything else. I've put the pieces together and I've judged you now. To come out as pansexual was the last thing that I came out as. It was the last layer. And it didn't happen until my late 20s. And quote unquote, ironically, it happened because my wife came out as pansexual. Yeah. And then we met and we got together and suddenly we were perceived as a heteronormative couple. And it was like, okay, how do we tackle this? And we have to be outspoken because we don't want to lose our identity.
Is your pansexuality then the most difficult piece of your identity to speak about, or do you find it difficult, more or less difficult to talk about certain pieces of your identity?
I find it's the most fraught with anger and response. I find that of the things that I talk about, it's the one that I know is going to cause the most friction. And it's the only one of my identities that affects every aspect of my life, and it changes everyone's perspective of how I should live my life.
So when people have a disability or talk about disability, it's often through a negative lens in many cases, and kind of what you're talking about. Otherwise, if it's not on a negative lens, you're either just like put on a little pedestal in a weird way, I guess, maybe for lack of better words. What's something that you think disabled people can do better than able-bodied people?
I used to joke about this. I used to say I was forced to slow down and smell the roses, to be very grateful for everything and to be kind of patient And I always also called it the great leveler. You kind of get a real good sense of reality and where your place is in the world very quickly once you've become disabled or if you were born disabled. And it really sets you up for this understanding of like, what are things that are worth being upset about and what are things that are not? And can we move beyond this? And I think it's made me more empathetic. It's made me more cautious because you can become disabled at any time. Why only care about it once you've become disabled? Why only care when it's happening to you? And it really changes your perception of the entire world.
So your wife, Carrie, is also pansexual, as you mentioned, and has a disability, Ehlers-Danlos syndrome. And you both work in similar fields. You recently co-wrote, directed, and starred in EDFC-nominated short film called Adoptive. You have a YouTube channel that you started together, and you often even collaborate on social media content. And a lot of the themes that run through those are around family planning. How is that going for you both, and what challenges had you faced so far?
I mean, it's been really wonderful, and we both really have wanted to build a family together, and we both come from very intricate, complicated family history, and so in a lot of ways, this is like been a healing journey for us. The perception of two disabled people having kids is such a complicated, and it's complicated for adoption. It's a complicated for natural birth and how people perceive you and your struggle. I mean, we joke about it, but I can't go down the street without walking my dog without somebody being like, he needs this and this, and you should be doing this for him. So I can't even imagine what it would be like and what it will be like when we're pushing a stroller down. We both want to be parents. And for me, I think, I've had struggles with father figures, and my father wasn't in the picture. And so I know it's going to kind of help heal a little bit of that wound and being able to be there as a father and wanting to be there as a father.
For those who might not be familiar with you and your work, where can they find you, and where can they stream your films Adoptive and Walk On?
They can find me on Instagram at Joseph A. Kibler or on TikTok at Joseph Kibler. As far as my YouTube channel, you can find me at Joseph and Carrie, which you'll find all of our videos. You can go to the Easter Seals Disability Film Challenge website for Adoptive. And Walk On will be getting back onto streaming platforms soon.
You've shared on social that you weren't supposed to make it past 4 years old, but you're currently here in front of me, undetectable and therefore untransmittable at 35. You're talking about family planning and so on. What are your hopes and aspirations and vision for the next 35 years?
To allow myself to plan more and actually put things on paper that we want to do and that I want to do and that I want to do with my family in a way that I didn't allow myself to do for like the first 25 years of my life because it just wasn't comprehensible. I didn't imagine I would be here. And it took me so long to figure it out that eventually I was like, oh, wait, I am here. Now I got to do something with this. Opening yourself up is always scary, but I think it comes with a lot more pros than it does cons. And I think when you allow yourself to be vulnerable and open, you find others that are willing to be vulnerable and open back to you. And that's how you make connections. And there are a lot of people online who want to throw hate your way, but opportunities can arise from it. And you can find a much full version of yourself. And just that I encourage people to do that.
Joseph, thank you so much for your time today. It's truly been a pleasure and a privilege. And I hope you have a wonderful rest of your day and a happy Pride.
Thank you so much. And thank you for having me. Happy Pride.